I am Simona Falanga and I welcome you to the very first Young European Leadership Debate, which will hopefully be the first of many. As we approach the 2014 Euro elections, it is time to discuss the role of the European Union and its future. For this reason, and following UKIP Nigel Farage and Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg's debate on the role of the European Union, we decided with Young European Leadership to bring you a debate on the EU issue in which you will be able to state your opinion. But let's meet our participants. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Mateusz Ciński, I'm from Poland and I'm also representing European Federalist Party. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Victoria Almond. I have dual nationality, French and English. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stefan Spalato. I'm the president of the Conservative Society at Coventry University and also a member of the Conservative Party, and I'll be embracing their views today.
I'm Neil Poynton. I'm the chairman of Nuneaton Conservative Future and I'll be representing the Conservatives today.
Okay, and we also have two participants that will be joining us on Skype. If you can please introduce yourselves.
I guess I'll start. Yes, so maybe the sound isn't that great, but anyways, I'm Alexander, I'm Swiss and Dutch, currently in Switzerland. I'm involved in volunteering, especially interested in education and evolution of education as well in the European Union as a whole. Being in ESN, maybe you guys know about it, and Simona knows a little bit.
Okay, then I'll go further. My name is Albert. I'm from Belgium, Brussels. I was born in small Ingushetia. Probably some of you know where it is, in North Caucasus. I'm studying management and finance here in Brussels, and I'm also involved in many conferences, and especially like topics where Europe is involved as well. I'm also a member of YEL.
After a short opening statement for both teams, as the Europhile and the Eurosceptic team, the debate will be divided into two parts. In the first part, there will be a number of questions on the EU and its future role, and each participant will have 1 minute to reply to such questions. In the second part of the debate, I will read a number of statements made by prominent Eurosceptic politicians, as well as popular Eurosceptic views that our participants, again, will have 1 minute to comment on. So, okay, let's get started. I don't know, as to decide maybe which team should start, probably, I don't know, flip a coin, maybe? Can we do that?
Heads or tails?
Tails?
Okay, your tails, you don't get a choice. Your tails.
Heads. Do you want to start or answer?
I'll start.
Okay, would you like to start with the opening statement then?
Firstly, I'd like to thank the chairman for setting this brilliant opportunity and giving young future European leaders a chance to speak and to make their views known. And secondly, I would like to state that we embrace a constructive skepticism, as our views are far from being aggressive or hostile. We are looking to negotiate for the creation of a new settlement with Europe in order to create a functioning network of cooperating states rather than a supranational bloc. We will construct our argument looking at a future past relationship. We see that the Second World War was important in constructing Europe as it is today, but the determination of Britain came about gradually and not at all impulsively. We were there when the Berlin Wall fell. The great continent was coming together, healing the wounds of our history. The legacy has been overcome. We've come a long way from there. We should never take it for granted, but the purpose to secure peace has been achieved. The main purpose today is to secure prosperity for individual nations. From the surging economies in the East to the established economical bodies in the West, we can take this opportunity to further Britain's position and that of all the member states. Beneficial changes of Europe can be felt by entrepreneurs here in Britain and workers in Germany. UK has the character of an island nation that we need to understand. We cannot drain the British sensibility. EU is the means to an end. How, why, to what end is questions are just questions we hear time and time again. Not just an island story, but also a continental story. This is Britain in our eyes and in everyone else's eyes. In Europe's darkest hour, Britain kept the flame of freedom alight. Contained in this history is the key of this debate: independent and open. No isolationism, but a better deal for UK and Europe as a whole. Why raise further questions in perilous times? Because it is essential. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on to the other team's opening statement.
Okay, thank you very much. With the Euro elections fast approaching and a significant increase in media attention and public interest in the UK's membership of the Union, I'm sure today we will focus on the important economic considerations and hotly debated issues of immigration and migrant workers in the UK, mirroring the concerns of the British public debated so recently by Farage and Clegg. But while I would argue that all the evidence and statistics point towards a poorer, weaker and isolated nation should we leave the Union, and the arguments against our imposed immigration policies are, for the most part, misinformed or unrealistic, I also believe that this valuable debate comprises something bigger than this, a wider picture. All of us here today are young. To be unashamedly cliched, we are all the future and have the power to shape the political, economic and environmental horizons of generations to come. To leave the Union, or to follow in our parents' and grandparents' footsteps in stubbornly dragging our heels and refusing to accept change, would be to watch the world around us develop and to stay frozen, clinging desperately to null ideals such as parliamentary sovereignty and the Queen in Parliament. We must embrace change, embrace the move towards further integration and replace the nationalism so rooted in the past and conservative ideals with a sense of unionism that I and all those of my generation should feel. We should be proud to be a part of the world's largest economy, and Britain's long-term aim must be to play a full and integral part in making the EU live up to its name and become a veritable union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be moving now on to the first part of our debate. I suppose we might start from you, as you are the one doing the opening statement, and we'll move anti-clockwise. The question is, will Eurosceptics be the big winners of the 2014 Euro elections?
Thank you for the question. It is a very important one, as we are all familiarised with the current debates around it. There is a growing frustration that the EU is not acting on people's behalf. That is felt nationwide. Misplaced funds, unequal distribution of resources. We need to plan for the future, and we need to make that plan clear to the public. The biggest issue is denouncing a new ideological initiative, fundamental far-reaching change. That is the core idea of Euroscepticism. We might look at extremists such as UKIP, but we need to understand that although some may use the Euro vote as a protest vote, they will gradually realise that European elections are becoming more and more important as we want to renegotiate our place within Europe. The single market is in our point the most important, and that is what people want, and that is what people are willing to fight for and protest with their vote to gain and to protect the parliamentary sovereignty and what they see as their national identity and freedom. But Britain is at the heart of Europe. Their votes do count, and we will expect the people to make their voice heard through the vote. They will protest, and Eurosceptics will be the big winners of the upcoming elections.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I do agree. Standing as a candidate for local borough council myself, which happens to be on the same day as the Euro elections, from the campaigning I've been doing on residents' doorsteps, it does seem as though Eurosceptics will be the big winners, namely UKIP in Britain. I think this demonstrates a real crisis within the European Union, a democratic crisis. People in Britain feel that the EU has become something which they never signed up to. Everyone accepts that the single market is very beneficial for Britain, and that's what we should be embracing as a nation, using the EU as a means to an end, ensuring that Britain has the best possible deal. And people are using the European elections to voice their concerns over one very particular issue, the membership. I believe people will use it as a protest vote, and Eurosceptics will be the big winner.
It's a very interesting question because, again, so the Nigel Farage versus Nick Clegg debate happened this week, and although Farage was just awful, the polls showed that the public did back Farage. So I think it would be a bit naive to deny that there's not going to be a lot of protest voting in May. I think that Eurosceptics will probably win in terms of votes and numbers, but that doesn't actually constitute a win at all. They should not. It's interesting that you talk about a democratic crisis and like protesting and sort of protecting parliamentary sovereignty and that votes count, because the point of UKIP is that they are a protest party, so they then get into the European Parliament and become MEPs, but then do not vote, and that is fundamentally against democracy. And therefore I would have to urge the public, however we can spread the word, not to vote for UKIP because it's just not politics. Thank you.
Cool. In my opinion, yes, there is a greater chance that the Eurosceptics will be the winner in this year's elections. However, you all have concentrated on the UKIP and on Britain. I'm here representing the continental side of Europe, and in Europe, despite that in Britain there is a quite big Euroscepticism, in Europe there are movements that are very much pro-European, which will take part in the elections, and they might have their win as well in these elections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a short contribution? Are you aware that the leadership of the ECR has multiple Polish representatives?
Yes, I am.
So they do embrace similar views across the continent as well. It's not something that can relate specifically to Britain.
Yes, but there is also movements in Greece, there is also movements in Brussels, France, which are very much pro-European, and they are willing to see much more integrated Europe. So we have both groups running head-to-head.
I also think we're talking more about the kind of the electorate and the public. So while obviously in every institution you will have people who represent different parties, so obviously there are going to be Polish people in the ECR, but I think in terms of continental Europe, public opinion, you might have a lot more pro-European people on the continent.
I think if I can add one thing myself, actually, is I think that the UK is probably the country in which anti-Euroscepticism, anti-Eurosceptic discourse is better developed, because you do have other Eurosceptic parties, notably in France with the Front National, but their arguments aren't as better constructed. Because, for example, Front National, for my dissertation, I had to read all of their manifestos, and they keep talking about renegotiating the 50th article, which is actually for pulling out of the European Union. So they talk of renegotiation about an article that is actually about pulling out, and they don't actually make sense in the views. They keep contradicting each other all the way through the manifesto. So I think, we need to give the UK some credit. At least their Eurosceptic discourse is better constructed as opposed to parties in European mainland.
Thank you for the compliment.
All right, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And okay, shall we go? Alexandre, would you like to chime in as well?
Yeah, I guess I'll step in. it's kind of a tricky question. I don't know exactly how it works in Great Britain. I know I've heard a lot about what happens in France with the Front National, because in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, you have a lot of the French television and a lot of people watch that. And I don't know actually exactly. I cannot really tell if the Eurosceptics are going to win the elections. I know for sure that in France, right now, the feeling is a bit that Marine Le Pen, who is at the head of that Front National, it isn't really bringing much to the debate of the European Union as a whole.
Albert?
Yes, I'll also step in. As Alexander just said, I think it's a very, very tough question. Me, honestly, I think there's not an exact answer to this question. Why? Because, well, I don't think that the Eurosceptics will win the elections first. But then, at the same time, no matter the results, at the end, they will pretend that they have won them. If we take the situation in France with the Front National, well, they announced also a big win situation from their part, but actually it is not. They truly, yes, they have won some small communes, but at the end it is nothing. So I don't think that they will win the elections, but of course we can discuss it. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And on to our second question. Would your country be better off outside the EU, and why?
As I argued before, our attitude is that of a constructive skepticism. It's not aggressive and is not straightforward when it comes to taking a radical decision. Hasting now would only be damaging to Britain. The biggest issue is that we need to focus on some simple points, which also David Cameron made in his January speech. First of which was competitiveness. The single market is obviously important. It cannot be marginal. A fair competition of trade deals and fair trade between member states is vital. These are the tasks that we need to keep the cut down, reduce bureaucracy busy with. Controlled spending. Why is there no single market council, for example? This is one of the questions we pose as Eurosceptics. Second of which is flexibility. We accept that we need a common set of rules, but a response needs to be quick to adapt. The EU must act with great care when it comes to integration. 17 of the member states are part of the Eurozone, 10 are not. Not all countries are part of the Schengen area, while some are just refused the privilege. We should welcome diversity. The only foundation should be the single market. Big institutional changes to safeguard our interests and to protect European democracy need to be made. You cannot choose the basis of national needs. They are just there. That is why national initiative is vital to the running of the central parliamentary bloc. The European Court of Justice, for example, has enforced measures to increase centralization. Thirdly, protecting national integrity. We have a view on Europe, but our security, diversity, military expenditure, and the issue of European integration should come after power being able to flow back to member states, which is really important for their sovereignty. The Balances and Competences Review, for example, has been released to let us see where the advantages and shortcomings of Europe are. Neither right nor necessary to require professionals to be sent to Brussels to be held accountable. Fourthly, democratic legitimacy. Bigger and more significant role for national parliaments. No European divos is that. Bundestag in Westminster, on the same side, should hold every EU decision or negotiation results into account. Fairness, lastly, participation in the single market and the ability to set its rules are the primary reasons to our membership. That is why we don't want out at the moment. The Conservatives want to win the elections, and by 2017, after our position has been furthered as much as possible, we can provide people with their natural right to have a say on the EU. But at the moment, we can have so much more out of Europe. It would be irrational and damaging to Britain to encourage an out attitude. And a short note here, the fiscal coordination and banking union are threatening to member states. I'll just leave that open. I'm sure it was part of the debate.
Okay, thank you.
I don't believe at this moment in time this is a question that is answerable. With the Eurozone crisis, which is currently ongoing and being resolved, the nature of the EU will change. The most important thing about the EU for Britain is the single market. As we've already said, the EU is a means to an end. It's about spreading the ideal of prosperity and ensuring that Britain gains from the institutions it's part of. The beauty of the Conservative position is to take the heat out of this debate and ensure that it's a cool-headed discussion. We want treaty change within Europe. We understand that will be difficult, and if it proves impossible, we will ask a mandate of the British people to renegotiate a settlement within Europe. And alongside that, a referendum. That referendum will underpin the key feature of our democracy, which is people's right to vote and say what they want for their country. But it is important that that vote is made with a cool head, with understanding of why we benefit from Europe, primarily the single market, but also to respect constituents and people's scepticism, their nationalism. That's the Conservative position, and that's what I stand by.
I believe this question can be answered now, of course, and I believe that we would not be better off outside the EU. You've talked a lot about the kind of the economic arguments and talked about trade and the single market, in a sense kind of praising the European Union, and this is what we need to do. So the European Union counts as 50% of is our trading partner, and 50% of our exports go to the EU. Therefore, were we to pull out of the EU, it would be very naive to assume that we could continue to export that much there, because even if it was all very sort of mature, break-up kind of thing, there is just no way that we could have as solid a trade agreement as we have inside the EU. Therefore, that's quite a straightforward point that we would not be better off outside the EU. You also talk about the need to kind of each law for it to be approved by our parliament because of parliamentary sovereignty and ability. I feel like one of the main issues that's brought up about the EU is that it's overly bureaucratic and therefore it costs too much. Nigel Farage saying 55 million, the figure plucked out of nowhere, but that would double the bureaucracy. So I feel that that's kind of, it's maybe a sacrifice that you do need to make, that you have to hand over a little bit of parliamentary sovereignty to the European institutions, but Parliament is technically still sovereign according to some models, okay, so you can still, refuse and have the declarations of incompatibility and things. And one last thing is that it's also good to have centralised law in quite a few areas of law. For example, environmental law, you want to have sort of blanket environmental law for the whole of the Union in order for any change to happen and for political change. Thank you.
I'll speak as of Polish position. We joined the EU in 2004. Now we are celebrating 10th anniversary of being in the European Union, thanks to which since 1989 we could progress. and we could develop many parts of our not only economy but also of the social aspects as well. And the main aim of the European Union is to provide the security. One of the main aims was to provide the security and a stable situation in Europe after the Second World War. Now, looking at the East, what is happening now in Ukraine, I believe that it's much better to be in the Union among all the European states rather than outside and facing the threat alone.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure, Alexandre, do you feel like answering this question as your country is not actually a member of the EU?
That's quite funny that you're asking me that, but yeah, of course. I mean, even though I'm in Switzerland, that doesn't mean that I don't have an undergrad. I mean, in my opinion, this is not really a question that is like important to ask in a certain way. I mean. There has been, like, I don't know for how long that we've been building up the EU, that's for a reason. And in my opinion, it is right now that we, exactly like, especially with elections, that we need to show that we're involved in what we feel about how the EU does. And in my opinion, stepping out of the EU is actually taking a step back. I know that there are some people that believe that stepping out makes you a lot more, how do you say, independent in the way you make choices for your country. But at the same time, depending on how you shape the EU, that can actually, have its benefits as well. And if we're trying to set it up, especially starting with the single market, as one of you guys said before. I mean, that's the first step for a lot of other things that actually works well. So I don't see any kind of reason to say that your country would be better off outside the EU concerning the countries that are currently inside. So of course, concerning Switzerland, it has always been some kind of like a drama question in a way. But I mean, for the question of Switzerland, that's I am under the impression that the people fear more than they are aware of what happened. So, just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Albert?
Yes, well, you know that I'm from Belgium. So, in my opinion, well, the question being out of the European Union is simply unthinkable for Belgium. As you may know, Belgium was one of the founding members, even back to 1951 with the ECSC, and also the founding member of the European Union in 1993. So, of course, well, all these elements make Belgium really a strong ally of the EU. Second argument is the free trade. You all mentioned the single markets. I think that being in Europe is a huge asset, especially for Belgium, being a small country. We trade a lot with our partners and with our neighbors. So this also makes us to want to stay in the EU. Then the next element is that we all share the open borders. Being in the EU, we have to remember this. We have the free trade and the free travel. We can travel from Spain to Netherlands freely without any controls on the borders. This all has been made thanks to Europe. And then also, well, if one country will be out of the EU, then it means that we have, well, it will be also out of all the EU treaties. Let it then be on economic side, social side, security, as our colleague from Poland mentioned, cultural, criminal, etc., etc. So I think that being in EU is a value that we have to cherish. Thank you.
Should the EU continue further enlargement?
My answer would be somewhat close to a negative one. Again, we need to understand that people fear the EU, they question the democracy, the European bureaucracy at the moment. They ask, why can't we just have a single market? This is a question that is heard time and time again, but the level of political integration goes far beyond the British comfort zone. Again, I return to my idea regarding the island identity. Democratic consent for the EU is getting thinner and thinner by the day. Pointing this out is not irresponsible or threatening, as some of our liberal counterparts may identify, to entrepreneurial activity. When the question is finally put there, it is the fear that people would vote to pull out. Of course, we should give them the option. That is the democratic way to do it. But we should negotiate. We should take the heat out of this debate and enable our voters to have a cold head and to be rational about their decision. Confronting the problem head on is the only rational way. But we can't do it straight away. At the moment, between the status quo and leaving, it's flawed to think that. We need a chance to ask the most basic questions on the nature of the European Union. The measures needed to
change the Eurozone will alter the EU drastically. We need to see that. We need to be part of the EU when the EU finally listens to the Eurosceptics and becomes something far better than it is now. Patience is wiser as new members are welcomed and expenditure suffers substantial alterations.
It's not so much the EU that should enlarge as the ideals which the EU seeks to embrace, so democracy, so the economic values, the single market. These are the philosophies that we wish to spread. It's evident that Europe at the moment is not particularly working, as evident from the lack of democratic support for it, and that's the real question we need to be pushing here, because if we do not address this problem, then it will further fuel the rise of UKIP and of nationalist parties, which is obviously dangerous and will threaten not only the EU as a political union, but the ideals which it seeks to establish. So the real issue we need to be addressing here is legitimacy, not furthering the EU's boundaries.
I agree with you to an extent about the ideals that we need to further, really. And as I mentioned, the EU is very much, for me, focused on kind of trade and the benefits of the trade. So while on the face of it, it might seem good to enlarge and therefore have another country to also be part of the trading partnership, I think the kind of cultural aspect of it is still very important, because with the sort of democratic legitimacy, you're right in saying that the more countries are part of the union, the fewer kind of percentage our MEPs make up, for example. And if we were to use Turkey as an example, as a kind of wanting to be a part of the union, we could see quite a disparity between the sort of the cultures and maybe the ideals as well, and therefore it should be slow and very considered. Although in the long term, I think that we do want all of Europe to be included in the European Union.
I believe that the European Union should stop its enlargement for at least another 10 years. So, as you all probably mentioned, the European Union should integrate within more before moving further with enlargement. For me, the main point, the turning point was enlargement by Croatia. I think it was done in the wrong times, because it was done in the times when most of the countries in Europe suffered from the economic crisis. Therefore, I believe that that should be the last country for another 10 years, and then we should revise and reform the European Union to strengthen our relations and move towards more political union, which will continue to keep Europe stable and secure.
Okay, thank you. Alexandre?
Yes, I'm under the impression that it is not the right moment to continue the further enlargement of Europe. I mean, yeah, of course there has been the crisis, but there's currently as well kind of like questions as well concerning the EU, what they're doing, etc. And I'm really under the impression that neither Europe nor, for example, Turkey, the example you took, are ready to actually work together. In my opinion, it is about time that we start actually building up a common identity, well, not a common identity, but I mean a common understanding of who we have in the EU and how we can work together. And until that is done, I believe there should not be a further enlargement.
Okay, thank you. Albert, what do you think?
Yes. I really believe in the enlargement for my part, actually. Because, the EU actually was based on the respect for human rights, on the rule of law, on freedom, and of course on a democracy. I mean, if other countries have these values and meet the criteria, whether economic or democratic, why should we stop them from joining the EU? There was someone mentioning the economic issues. I think that's on the contrary. By enlarging the EU, we will boost actually the economic growth and create more jobs. How? Well, first of all, we remove the trade barriers among countries, and then second of all, is that we will be able to share the innovation and in every economic lesson as a start point we learn that the innovation boosts the growth. This is it's obvious, and also I think that's by joining the EU, these countries they will have a better quality of life. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just like, can I contribute?
Okay, sure.
I just want to say that now in Europe we have this massive gap between the newcomers from 2004, which is Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, 2007 enlargement and further. So that's why I believe that we should work towards equalizing this, it's basically economic gap between the West and the East, because you can see still this division in Europe, and I think we should also concentrate on that as well, so there'll be no more comments that that the cheap labor is coming to the UK and taking the jobs and so on and so forth. If everything will be equalized, then it won't be an issue.
Actually, on the UKIP billboard with the that worker whose job was taken as an Irish migrant.
I mean, answer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, go on.
Okay. Well, here the concern was about the workers. I think that's, all these workers who actually move freely in Europe, well, they contribute to the economy of the country where they live, whether they decide to live in Poland or in the UK. And, the gap, which was pretty wide, yes, before joining the EU, I believe that this gap is narrowing now since 2004 for these countries.
It certainly is. However, we should put more emphasis on that to work to make this gap smaller, and
So the first statement I will be reading was made by Nigel Farage. If you try to impose a new flag, a new anthem, a new president, a new army, foreign policy, police force, without seeking the consent of the people, you endanger to create the very nationalism and resentment you plan to eradicate in the first place. Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP, European Parliament plenary session, April 2014. Please comment.
Okay.
I was not expecting a baffling comment from Nigel Farage, but it came in the end. Obviously, the official stance of Conservatives regarding UKIP and Nigel Farage is that we should not vote for them. They are dangerous for democracy. They don't have a clear party structure. They cannot provide as politicians, as professionals in the field. When you integrate such unprepared individuals into a complex democracy like the EU, the risk grows. And they are representing one of the most important countries of the EU. So there is a real danger there. Please highlight this. We need more people to know that UKIP cannot possibly deliver on a professional level, even though they promise all these things. If we look at the activity of the ECR, for example, they are Eurosceptics. They fight the EU from within, similarly to what Nigel Farage wants to do, but they are professional about it. They know how to pose certain questions. They embrace a professional attitude. They don't make a mockery of a political institution. So, no Nigel Farage for the EU elections would be my Christmas wish list. We don't always get what we want.
Something actually during the plenary session, like his phone would actually ring and he would get out of the room.
Yes.
During the plenary session, because I've seen him doing that plenty of times. The only chance I got to speak to him, he was just mocking fellow politicians, like insulting Merkel and Hollande, like called Hollande an economic idiot, and he said that Merkel was even more boring in private life than she's in public. So no, and I can assure you that because I've had lunch with her. I was like, all right.
Merkel is one of the most exciting politicians that are in Europe.
He's great.
Okay, so I think this quote demonstrates the standard politics of fear that UKIP are trying to portray within the voting population. Saying that we'll have a new police force, a new European army, we'll have a new flag. It's simply not the case. As Conservatives, we believe in using institutions to further the needs of Great Britain to accomplish them. Although we're opposed to further political integration, we believe that the methods of the AECR are the right methods, and that sort of constructive Euroscepticism which seeks to further Britain's economic involvement and to further the needs of Great Britain within Europe. What we don't need is this heated debate which Farage is trying to portray in that statement there. We need a cool-headed, informative discussion where we can weigh up the real pros and cons of the European Union and then eventually give people a referendum to decide whether, yes, we agree with the economical argument, we agree with the EU in terms of its aims to spread the ideals of democracy, fair, free trade and so on, or whether they are nationalists. But that must be a cool decision, it mustn't be a heated one.
There is absolutely nothing I disagree with that you've said, which is strange, but yeah, I would agree. I think that we probably all agree that Farage is not good at arguing at all, and this is just an example of his poor construction of arguments and saying that the aim of the European Union is to eradicate the nationalism that we, and to impose a new flag and anthem. That is just ridiculous, and I'm very surprised that he said that this month, and yet still was deemed to win over Nick Clegg in a debate.
Okay, thank you. An example, would you like to comment?
Yeah, actually, I feel that this statement is unnecessarily aggressive. I mean, use of eradicating nationalism. I mean, who said that about the EU? I believe no one is trying to eradicate nationalism. That's the very basis. I mean, I agree when he's saying it shouldn't be a top-down approach, but at the same time, the answer to that is not really the one that we're supposed to create with the EU. So
That's Nigel Farage. When was it that it was during a plenary session that he said that we lived in a German-dominated Europe. And he started going, you should all be fired, you should be fired, you should be fired.
Yeah.
And then Martin Schulz was just laughing his head. Okay, Albert?
Yes, I think that's, this is simply ridiculous, these statements. The UKIP is saying that those who are scared of immigrants should vote for UKIP. Those who are really against taxes, against regulation, against especially Brussels, should vote for UKIP. This is, yes, as I said, this is ridiculous in my opinion. Anyone who can think and understand the consequences will simply understand that his statements are dangerous for democracy. Of course, well, it's easier to make people who are not very well educated believe what you want them to believe, and by scaring them, by saying that these ones are by helping responsible the other ones. I think that with the Treaty of Lisbon, we clearly see that what Europe wants is giving more powers, in this case, to the European Parliament. And should I remember that the members of the European Parliament are elected by direct universal suffrage, and they represent the citizens of every country. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And this one is not much of a statement, but it's a popular Eurosceptic belief, especially among UKIP, again. There is this belief among Eurosceptic parties that free movement allows cheap manual labour from Eastern Europe, notably Romania and Bulgaria, to settle in other EU member states and create an oversupply of labour, which then leads to a decrease in wages and unemployment. What do you think?
Right. Here I can also represent the views of decent Romanians. I'm the official representative of the Romanian Conservatives based here in the UK, being named by the Romanian Conservative Party. What happens, basically, the people that come here to work, most of them, from my knowledge, I know hundreds of Romanian immigrants that come here to work, mainly. What is truly threatening here is the way integration happens. Most of them, because their language skills are not fully developed, most of them go for the black labour market, which can be damaging to the economy. Also, in Eastern Europe, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, you get particular social problems. For example, the Romani integration problem. It is a problem we have been trying to deal with for over 20 years. We have been aided by Europe, we have been aided by the UN, with funds, human resources to actually try and integrate the Gypsy community. But as you know, on a cultural level, they are reluctant they are sometimes reluctant to renounce their cultural beliefs, as they see our world to be impure, and to stick to their ways. They become a transferable social issue, and France has seen it, Italy has seen it, and Britain has seen it, which is rather unfortunate. And now it is an European issue, not just a Romanian, Bulgarian or Serbian issue. So the problem is really complex. Again, we need to keep a cold-minded approach when talking about sensible issues like this. I have delivered a speech on immigration a few weeks ago, where I said that both the people employed by the UK Border Agency and the immigrants should be cooperating in a good, productive way. And most importantly, the people who assess them should be sensible and well trained. So it is an issue that needs to be dealt with great care.
Thank you.
So this sort of argument, often used by UKIP and other non-constructive Eurosceptics, highlights a very important issue. Many residents bring up the issue of immigration on the doorstep, as you would expect. And although it may be right, and we may have a consensus opinion over whether benefits tourism is wrong, what is really happening here is an exaggeration of the problem, adding to this the heated debate. And immigration has been shown to be good for an economy. The majority of people who come to this country from the European Union, I believe, want to work. However, there isn't that overwhelming perception among the voting population. That's what really needs to change here, I believe.
Yeah, again, I agree with you, Neil. Obviously, I think it is an exaggeration of the problem in terms of the migrant workers.
26 million, I think.
Yes, 26 million.
We don't even have any.
No, exactly. But yeah, it's also proven that it is good for the economy. So people might be from another country, but when they come to the UK, they do pay taxes. And had a figure somewhere. Between 2001 and 11, Nick Clegg said that £22 billion had been pumped into the UK economy just by workers that come in from Europe due to the open borders. In terms of the oversupply of labour, I'd like to kind of see the real figures of that, because like I said, I think it's an exaggeration with parties such as the UKIP that really just like, they took our jobs, kind of like really exaggerate it and just make it ridiculous. But there are so many benefits as well from very varied and different skills that people can bring in from other areas from outside the UK, and I think that we should always bear that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Alexandre, would you like to comment?
Yeah, this is a funny question because, you know, in Switzerland we have that kind of Bureau Fédéral des Statistiques, and you can have all kinds of statistics freely, and it's available to everyone. And before the question, I was just thinking, how about checking this out for Romanian migration towards Switzerland, because obviously Switzerland is in the Schengen area, and let's see how it goes. And apparently, what I see is that Germans coming in Switzerland like 573,000 in 2008, and in comparison, Bulgaria was 87. And I mean, in this regard, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. It's just completely not true, that statement. I mean, if Switzerland is part of the free movement area, and the UK is as well, why would these guys go even further to UK than go to Switzerland? Maybe it's easier to get a working permit or whatever. I mean, I don't know, but like, just looking at the numbers, I mean, it's ridiculous the difference that there is between those two numbers. So this is just simply not true.
Okay, thank you. Albert?
Yes. Well, I think that's in this course, well, he's simply overstating the problem. I also think that this is not true. I mean, yes, there is the free trade and the free movement of people. And if these people can travel freely and they want to work in the UK, they contribute to the economy of this country. Because they consume, they go to buy foods and goods, they go to hospital, I don't know, wherever else. And if they agree to work for lower wages, then it's their right. But, well, you know, at the end of the day, if they decide to do it, then others, then let's say British, they could do this as well. But they are not doing this. They are not agreeing to work for lower wages. You know, and the statements stating that it contributes to unemployment. This is simply ridiculous. It is not contributing to unemployment. it in any point. The real issue, I think, is the financial crisis of 2007. If we compare the situation of today and before the crisis, well, these movements, these four, well, in my opinion, extremist even movements, they had no people voting for them before the crisis. Well, now with the crisis, it is simply too easy to point to someone, to point to Brussels, to Europe, making them responsible of every problem. The real problem is that these governments, well, the governments who are accusing Europe, they couldn't make reforms, and they couldn't, I think, to adopt the right measures.
Okay.
May I just add something?
Sure.
Tim?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was just thinking as well, I mean, like, someone before was talking about the social problem, and I completely agree that's the problem that we have to face with people coming from Romania and Bulgaria, but that's something still different than talking about cheap manual labor from Eastern Europe. I mean, like, in one side it's an economic question, and the other side is a social question, and I believe that there is something to do with the social aspect in there, yes.
Actually, one thing I would add myself as well is that people shouldn't be blaming so much the Romanians and Bulgarians coming here and working for cheaper, because if they do so, it means that someone is letting them. So businesses are employing people on dodgy contracts, allowing them to work for cheaper. So really the British people in this particular scenario aren't harmed by the Romanians and Bulgarians as such, but by maybe fellow countrymen that employ such population with cheaper, and they give them less money than they should do.
There's also a huge body of employment law that protects the British workers from being discriminated against in any way, and when migrant workers are kind of preferred over British workers, often it will be illegal and therefore recoverable by the courts.
As a classical liberal, I do believe in market competition, encouraging market competition, and having new blood when it comes to labour force can encourage the price of labour, the quality of products, the quantity of products, so on and so forth. It can revolutionise certain sectors of the economy. We've seen it time and time again, particularly in the Industrial Revolution period that carried it on in the post-war period.
So you for the open borders kind of policy that we have?
Well, I think it should be treated with great care, as I said before.
Yeah.
Of course, we need background checks. Of course, we need to make sure that the British borders are safe. Not just the British borders. All the national borders are safe for them, because it's sovereignty, and actually the UN positions sovereignty above human rights. It happens time and time again, and they refer to that piece of law when the debate's passed. So we should let countries decide their immigration policy as long as it is sensible, but it is their right to decide it. Citizenship rights, the immigration rights, tax policy regarding immigrants, at least those can go on.
It's a huge step backwards, though, if that were to.
Okay, so we actually come to our final question. Are you in favour of further political integration?
I think this question was asked before.
The question was asked before, and then I corrected myself, and I asked the one about enlargement.
No, I understand. No, I understand. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. My answer is a conservative answer, and it's rather negative. We should look at the EU in a sceptical way in order to reform it, in order to make it suitable for all member states, and most importantly for the EU citizens. In Britain, people don't call themselves European before British. They call themselves English,
Scottish, Irish, British, and afterwards maybe European, but that rarely happens. I talk to countless individuals on different comprehension levels, and they rarely call themselves European. I return to my point that a new settlement can be negotiated. It is important to have discussions like this so we can clean the heat out of the debate, so we can actually construct a reasonable argument for this case. Justice, home affairs and powers, common fishery policies, these all are issues that can be discussed easily in a controlled, educated environment and can be much more productive rather than just using politics of fear or economic flourishment. The EU will need to agree towards to a treaty change. That is vital. And I return back to my point on flexibility here. It needs to be flexible in order to be successful. Otherwise, if it's rigid, if it continues to force an unnatural, unorganic integration, political integration expenditure, it will fail. And then we won't have a say on it, whether we should leave it or not. We'll have to leave it. And I hope that won't be the case, because that would affect the single market in a drastic way.
With the rise of the superpowers, super economies of Eastern Asia and America, it's important that the European Union remains competitive. We do have a crisis of competitiveness in the European Union at the moment, partly because of the bureaucratic red tape. To have a competitive Europe, we also need a flexible Europe. And what we as Conservatives believe in is not the idea of a European Union as much as a European network in which the character and needs of each individual state is respected, and the relationships between those states aren't forced but are the result of mutual respect and desire to work with each other, which we believe is the cocktail for a much stronger bond than to have it forced upon us. Different countries obviously have different needs, exemplified by the fact 17 countries are a member of the Eurozone, 10 are not. And the European Union needs to embrace that diversity rather than control it and play it on an unlevel footing. We should embrace each other's diversity.
I'd have to contend your last point about having different needs kind of according to the euro. I don't feel like that necessarily makes a different need, it's just a slightly different, like, tangible coin sort of thing. It's not going to make a very different national need. I feel that, especially, there are kind of two tiers to Europe. You know, there are economic disparities as well within Europe, but in the kind of Western Europe, we have the same needs as nations. When you talked about kind of how unnatural and organic it would be to kind of impose this political integration, I agree to an extent that we really do need to be careful about it as well, because we can't just, like, quite brashly, especially like just after this sort of Eurozone crisis and with the UK like in a frenzy about, you know, Farage and UKIP and lots of people wanting to leave, we really can't do it now. But at the same time, the Eurozone needs to have further political integration in order to solve the Eurozone crisis. So it could be that a two-tier Europe is inevitable, and it's the only way that we can go about actually solving the problem without kind of alienating the UK or becoming a kind of stagnant status quo with the Eurozone. When you talked about not calling themselves British, I don't feel that further political integration would change like people's national identity, because it's to do with the institutions. It's not really to do with, like, again, eradicating a national identity. And last thing, sorry, the crisis of competitiveness that you talked about as well, and we need a flexible Europe. Again, flexibility is a good thing, but we need to eradicate competition within Europe more than like to eradicate this crisis of competitiveness, and therefore we need further political integration in order to achieve that aim.
Relative competition how? Can you expand
Sorry?
on that? Relative competition how? Can you expand on that?
Sorry, by having further political integration, so centralisation in the European Union, I feel that there would be less competition in terms of kind of just the nations not feeling unified, and with the sort of the trade agreements and fiscally, economically, there is still kind of competition in terms of like just not feeling unified between the countries. Whereas with the further political integration, I feel that needs to happen before we can like solve the crisis of competitiveness outside.
Thank you. Alexandre?
Yes, so in my opinion, it's, I don't really know, but I believe it is all linked to the possibility for the EU to take strong positions. I mean, for example, last time we had something like that you had to face was like exactly, we talked about it before, the situation in Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is pretty much at the doors of Europe, and until now, I don't have any kind of like strong, I didn't get any strong opinion from the EU that they took position on one side or the other, or whatever position. And this is, in my opinion, a problem. Even though you are orienting yourself toward federation, federations still do have positions, even if they might be weaker. In my opinion, this is a problem and should be treated before you actually try to push further political integration.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Albert?
Yes, me personally, I believe in integration. We have already the political union in the European Union. We, since very recently, the European Parliament, you remember, backed the proposal of the Commission to complete the banking union. The next step, I believe, will be the fiscal union in the EU. So I think that with all these steps, by going further with the integration, it will bring the competitiveness, as someone mentioned before, the competitiveness to Europe against the world, let's say, to other countries such as China, Russia, United States, etc., etc. If we take, for example, the G7, how many countries do we have from the EU? 4 countries. If we take the G20, we have the same 4 countries in the G20 because we have many countries from the developing world, South Africa, South Korea, and so on and so forth. So we have to be competitive against others. And I really believe that the integration will bring us further to the European dream. And that we need more Europe, we need the United States of Europe. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all we have time for, I'm afraid. I know you were dying to reply. Hopefully you know where you stand now with regards to the European Union, and I'd like to thank all of the participants that consecrated their time to join us today, and I would like to remind you as well that our next debate will be on the EU and Euroscepticism from an international perspective. Thank you and have a nice day.